Tonight, from ancient times to the present, people claiming special powers have predicted similar events. Will their most fateful predictions of all soon come to pass? David McCallum is your guide to ancient prophecies. Next.
History is filled with astonishing predictions by seers who claim to foresee future events. Among them, the Egyptians, the prophets in the Bible, Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce. And all of these have at least one vision in common: the specter of an event yet to come that will change the world as we know it forever. The final judgment, Armageddon. What's more, the date and hour of this event has been repeatedly foretold. Ever since the earliest civilization, man has studied the past, lived in the present, and feared for the future. A future so elusive, so unknowable, that he has sought help in divining the secrets of time, often turning to the workaday prophets for hire, the fortune teller. Their neon signs beckon in the night from the seedy quarters of town. Palm readers, psychics, fortune tellers peddling advice to the lovelorn and curious, promising the impossible, offering a peek into the future.
Oh, spirits from beyond, tell me more. For you I see romance, love, passion, many new friends. Heartbreak.
What if one could see the future? Would it be a blessing or a curse?
It is a very big burden on my life. Sometimes I feel that I can change the course of someone's life. I take that very serious.
In Hollywood, California, Tila is a psychic to the stars. To protect the privacy of her famous clients, she asked to be interviewed about her special gift of prophecy in silhouette.
The power is mostly premonitions, dreams, feelings. If I were to sit down quietly, I would see many things happening around the world. Sometimes I find that I can turn it off, and sometimes I can't.
On hundreds of occasions, Tila claims her special gift has saved her clients and some total strangers from disastrous fates.
I was walking one day on a very busy street, and I saw a lady put a baby in her car, in the car seat. At that second, I felt that that woman was going to get hurt and the baby was going to get killed. I stopped her. I told her I'm a psychic, and please don't drive home. She didn't take my word for it. She just went on her way. And as soon as she pulled out, a car came and hit her directly in the back of her car. It wasn't very serious. She didn't get hurt. She looked at me, I looked at her, and I just walked away. Recently, I had a premonition about some kind of a ride in an amusement park, and that something was going to go wrong, and that a lot of children was going to get hurt.
Soon thereafter, at a Los Angeles children's park, a freak derailing of a train ride nearly killed dozens of children.
It was very frightening. And at that time, I didn't know if there was more that I could have done.
But Tila's visions often portend disasters over a much larger scale.
I was sitting down very quietly one day. When I closed my eyes, I saw a large building exploding. And I felt that it's going to be in New York City. The only thing I could think of, who can I save or what can I do? I located a client of mine, and I told her to stay away from large buildings within the next few days, because based on my experience, my premonitions only went 3 days.
Within days, according to Tila, television news showed the shocking aftermath of the terrorist bombing at the World Trade Center in New York City. But this was only one of the thousands of premonitions that have haunted Tila since her childhood.
I don't know where it comes from. I honestly can't tell you. My ancestors are from Egypt, and as far as we can trace, I am the 6th generation of psychic readers. We are only the women that have the psychic ability. And now I found that my child, my little girl, has the same ability. When my ancestors were in Egypt, they would preferably read in the pyramids. Our energies flowed through the pyramid and through our bodies.
A journey back to Egypt, the land of Tila's ancestors, the land of the pharaohs, will reveal what may be this world's most profound prophecy. Embodied in the Great Pyramid is what is purported to be a roadmap of the future that leads to a cataclysmic event at the end of this century. Rising from the desert sands of Egypt, the Great Pyramid bears silent witness to civilizations that have flowered and decayed. More than a mausoleum, it may guard the secrets of time. Author E. Raymond Capt.
It's not a pagan temple or a tomb of a pharaoh whose body never has been found. The pyramid definitely has a message for mankind. The Great Pyramid was built about 2623 BC during the reign of Khufu, second king of the 4th Egyptian dynasty. The builders came from Arabia, and they built several practice pyramids, training a workforce before they even started building the Great Pyramid. And when the Great Pyramid was built and finished, these builders left.
The monument they built may have been created for the living and not the dead.
The Great Pyramid was built disguised as a tomb. Khufu died 7.5 years after the pyramid was built, and he never intended that to be his tomb. One of the puzzling aspects of the Great Pyramid was there were no hieroglyphics found in the passage walls or ceiling or the sarcophagus. In this respect, the Great Pyramid is silent.
Silent, but not without a message. Some scholars believe encoded into the very structure of the pyramid may be mathematical and scientific knowledge of unbelievable precision that was unknown to the ancient Egyptians.
We find in the pyramid scientific features we never dreamed men had any knowledge whatsoever of in that early time, 2623 BC. One of the amazing features of the Great Pyramid is it's built on a pi ratio. We know the Egyptians didn't have that information, and yet it's there.
Even more inconceivable, embedded within the pyramid's interior passageways and chambers may be a timeline foretelling the future. Author Richard Noon.
The ancient astronomer, stonemasons that constructed the Great Pyramid, incorporated within the structure, etched in stone, a 6,000-year calendar.
Embodied in the design of the pyramid, we find three very significant dates. One of them is the birth of Christ, 1,000 years before the Bible was written, 2,000 years before Christ was even born. The pyramid is the prophecy in stone.
The secret to deciphering the Great Pyramid's prophetic calendar may lie in a simple equation. 1 inch equals 1 year.
If you start from the outside the pyramid, 2623 BC, when it was built, and start measuring forward in the passage system, allowing each inch to represent 1 year, you come to 1453 BC, when the first ascending passage starts going up. That's the date that the law was given on Mount Sinai to Moses.
Going up the calendar line a little bit further, we reach the birth of Christ. 33 1/3 inches later, we have the crucifixion. And then the whole passageway changes into a glorious architectural feat called the Grand Gallery. Then we move up, and according to the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, we enter 2 periods of tribulation. Those dates were World War I, World War II, right on the money.
Ominously, the passage rapidly leads to a room called the King's Chamber and a dead end. Some investigators fear this termination may portend the end of time.
The calendar in stone in the Great Pyramid ends on the year 55-2000. So it's certainly the ultimate disaster.
However, the Great Pyramid offers an alternate route, or stone calendar, that descends on a straight line into a subterranean chamber. If the equation holds that 1 inch equals 1 year, the year 2000 may also align with a gaping pit in the floor of the underground chamber. The prophecy of the Great Pyramid allegedly warns that the coming millennium may usher in the end time. This same prophecy reappears in the writings of 2 men who lived in Europe during the Middle Ages. One was known as the king among prophets, and the other became a saint. Over 800 years ago in Ireland lived a bishop, a healer, a seer through time, a prophet who claimed to predict the day and hour his life would end. His name was St. Malachi. His legacy? One remarkable prophecy reaching almost 1,000 years into the future. It came to him in a vision while on a pilgrimage to the holy city of the Vatican. Author John Hogue interprets Malachi's prophecy.
Upon seeing the holy city, he fell into an ecstatic trance and in short 3-word phrases predicted all the popes that would rule unto doomsday.
Malachi's prophecy, a coded list foretelling the next 112 popes, remained lost for ages inside Vatican archives. Author Dolores Cannon offers a theory.
It was many centuries later before the prophecies came to light and were brought to the public. And as they have examined them, they have all come true up to the present time.
According to some researchers, Malachi's prophecies contain an ominous warning that may come to pass in our time.
This Irish saint tells us that we only have 2 more popes after John Paul II.
2 more popes and Malachi's list reportedly ends. About the final pope and the end of the Holy Roman Church, Malachi writes, "The city of 7 hills shall be utterly destroyed, and the awful judge will judge the people." It's been said that St. Malachi's prophecy names this last pope as the one who shall bear witness to the destruction of Rome. If Malachi is correct, his name will be Peter the Roman, the very same name given to the first pope to sit in the Vatican. 300 years after Malachi, the name Peter Romanus, or Peter the Roman, was again heralded as the final pope to perish in a terrible future time. This second warning came from a man known as the king amongst prophets. Michel de Nostradame. Michel de Nostradame was born almost 500 years ago in 1503 in Provence in the south of France. In time, it was he who would be widely described as the king amongst prophets. Nostradamus predicted what has been interpreted as the rise of Napoleon and Hitler, also the coming of the Second and Third World Wars. He may have foreseen submarines and spacecraft centuries before their arrival. In his day, the Black Plague was ravaging the land, killing all who crossed its path. Surrounded by the squalor of 16th century Europe, Nostradamus first achieved fame not as a prophet, but as a healer.
Nostradamus tells the story of entering a plague-ridden town. He came upon a woman, affected by the plague, but still very much alive. She was sewing herself up in her own death shroud. Because she was fearful no one would be left alive in the town to do it for her. It was in just this environment that Nostradamus performed his medical miracles.
If Nostradamus had never predicted anything, he would be remembered as one of the great healers of the 16th century.
Tragically, Nostradamus found himself suddenly powerless when the Black Death struck his wife and child. Devastated, he wandered throughout Europe before finally remarrying and settling in Salon, France. It was here that he made some of his most amazing predictions.
Nostradamus had a very special room in his house that he used exclusively for his prophecies. It was cold and damp, dark, made entirely of stone. And there on a large wooden table, he used various looking-in devices. He had the best results with the special black mirror. He called this his doorway to the future.
What actually transpired in his study is still a mystery centuries later. Did he have visions or hear voices from beyond? Could he have traveled through time? Two facts are certain. His main inspiration came from a book, De Mysteriis Egyptorum, The Mysteries of Egyptology. And he recorded his visions of the future in the form of quatrains, which are a kind of poem.
Nostradamus wrote his quatrains in a mixture of languages, anagrams, symbolism. He devised this code because he was living during the time of the Inquisition, when the very idea of prophecy was forbidden and considered the work of the devil.
Scholars deciphering the quatrains claim they may warn of the rise of 3 antichrists and an apocalyptic final battle before the year 2000. According to some researchers, the first antichrist was a commoner who became emperor of France. Translated, Nostradamus gives us, "An emperor will be born near Italy. He will be found less a prince than a butcher." And Nostradamus gives him a name, Pau Ne Laron, or Napoleon Roi.
Napoleon was the first of 3 antichrists foreseen by Nostradamus. Each antichrist will take us a step closer to the final battle of Armageddon. Nostradamus had named all 3 of these antichrists. He called Napoleon Napoleon Roy. It's an anagram, a wordplay on the name Apollyon, the angel of the abyss in the book of Revelations.
Hundreds of years further into the future, some believe Nostradamus saw the rise of a second Antichrist. In one translation, he wrote of this man, "From the deepest part of Western Europe, a child will be born to poor people, who by his speech will seduce a great multitude." And again, the quatrains offer a name.
Adolf Hitler was Nostradamus' second Antichrist, and the quatrains surrounding him are remarkable for one thing. Nostradamus uses the word Hister not only as an obvious wordplay on Hitler's name, but Hister was also the exact ancient word for the Danube River, on the banks of which Hitler grew up. Nostradamus goes on to describe the crooked cross that would become the recognized symbol of Nazism.
Of course, Hitler's legacy is that he killed 50 million people and injured about 250 million. And in fact, Nostradamus describes the great ovens of the Holocaust.
From one translation of the quatrains, human death through flesh is burned to ashes. Also, he may have foreseen a ghastly event that ended the Second World War. Near the harbors between two cities, there will happen two scourges, the likes of which was never seen before. John Hogue continues his interpretation.
Nostradamus describes exactly what that scourge is. The two harbors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the plague doctor of the 16th century describes a pestilence within, a strange disease that kills them, kills so many people. This is radiation.
Actually, Nostradamus wrote quite a bit about the atomic bomb. In another quatrain, he referred to the explosion as the stone in the tree, the stone representing the bomb, and the tree representing our visualization of the mushroom cloud.
Atomic radiation, the bomb, electricity, radio, submarine and air travel, all of these believed to have been foretold by a man alive in the 16th century. Strangely, much of Nostradamus' prophecy centers on our time, as if his vision of the 20th century was especially clear. In one of his most vivid quatrains, he may have prophesied the untimely death of an American president when he wrote, "The great man will be struck down in the day by a thunderbolt."
The prophecies concerning the assassination of John Kennedy are among Nostradamus' greatest. Virtually every word of the quatrains ring true. The great man will be struck down in the day by a thunderbolt. From the roof, evil will fall on the great man.
Not only did Nostradamus appear to see JFK's assassination, he is believed to have predicted a modern-day psychic would try to warn the doomed young president. This may have been prophet and psychic Jean Dixon.
The whole assassination was revealed to me as though it were a motion picture. Just 10 days before he was leaving for Texas, I said, "I'm Jean Dixon. Go to the White House and warn the president that he must not go to Texas. If he does, he will be assassinated." And then I gave her the name of the assassin, Oswald.
A reading of Nostradamus could also have reassured President Kennedy with his wish to see an American on the moon. He will come to take himself to the corner of Luna. He will be placed on alien land. Some believe Nostradamus perceived that not all such exploration would be successful. 9 will be set apart from the human flock. Their fate will be sealed at the moment of their departure. Dolores Cannon feels this refers to the Challenger disaster.
Nostradamus actually predicted the Challenger disaster, but he went even further. He predicted that this would be the turning point in NASA's career.
Nostradamus also prophesied what until recently would have been unthinkable, a prediction that has been interpreted as an alliance between the United States and the former Soviet Union. He wrote, "The Great Wall in the East will fall. One day the great powers will become friends." Still, the peace that such an alliance implies may neither be long enough nor strong enough to ensure a peaceful world. No stranger to plagues, Nostradamus foresaw one, unlike any other, that would strike down much of the world in the last half of the last decade of the 20th century.
In fact, Nostradamus says that not only will 2/3 of the world be destroyed through this plague, he also says it will decimate the clergy of Mother Church.
But Nostradamus' unsettling visions for the 1990s only begin with a plague. He tells us that we will also witness the coming of the third Antichrist.
The third and final Antichrist is called by an enigmatic name, Mabus, M-A-B-U-S.
The information we have about the third Antichrist is that he was born on February the 4th, 1962, in Israel, in Jerusalem, but he is not a Jew, and he has been raised by an uncle who has put together a group of rich backers. These are the people who will finance his career in the taking over the world and the coming of the Third World War. But he will not make his appearance known until about 1995.
According to some interpretations, with his appearance will come great danger.
We will be plunged into a war of unspeakable horrors with atomic explosions, chemical warfare, biological warfare, laser warfare, weapons that we don't even think that could possibly exist. And this would climax to the point where the world would be starving to death, to the point that some countries would even turn to cannibalism.
But those who believe in these predictions say that even if we are able to either escape or defeat the third Antichrist, we can do neither with nature.
Nostradamus predicted 3 quatrains dealing with disasters for the United States before the 1990s were over.
It is believed Nostradamus foresaw boiling volcanoes, blistering winds, furious hurricanes, devastating earthquakes.
Nostradamus speaks of a great shifting of the globe over either 2 sudden jolts in a 6-month period or a slow roll, which will devastate and undermine entire civilizations. I believe, personally, that he is speaking of May of 2000, simply because it is a time of a grand conjunction of planets, a grand opposition of planets, which could pull gravitational forces to create such an earthquake in California.
Again, a warning for our time. Nostradamus writes, "In the year 1999 and 7 months, the great king of terror will come from the sky. He will resurrect Genghis Khan before and after war rules."
The Cold War has seen America and Russia become friends. This was predicted by Nostradamus, and it is a warning. It is the final warning before Armageddon. Russia and America's friendship will be undermined by a Middle Eastern, North African source. This will precipitate to a disastrous attack in the year 1999 in July.
My interpretation of the famous 1999 quatrain is a little different than the accepted one. Nostradamus saw that at the height of the Third World War, there would be a lot of experimental weaponry being used. And one of these was the horrible example of the cloning of armies, or the creation of war machines by the manipulation of the chromosomes to create a person who would be a murderer without any morals.
It is my opinion, after 20 years of traveling around the world and studying prophecies, that we make prophecy work by being so predictable. We repeat the past in the future. It is also a shared vision of most prophets that there's not much to say about future history after the year 2000.
Where did this power of Nostradamus originate? This vision into the future? Could it be divine? The answer may come from the mouths of children. For many who have claimed the power of prophecy, their gift is not a matter of birthright. Instead, its appearance has been linked to some life-altering event.
Fatima, Portugal, 1917. 3 children believed they were given a glimpse into the future. 9-year-old Lucia, 7-year-old Francisco, and 6-year-old Jacinta claimed visitation by a beautiful woman who entrusted them with secret messages, prophecies. While many appear to have come true, one message is still outstanding. A secret known only to Lucia, the 9-year-old girl, who today is a nun, and the Pope, John Paul II. In 1917, no one knew what awaited this sleepy little community. But the impact was so intense that more than 70 years later, it has become a haven for the hopeful. One of the many places in the world where believers claim to have seen a miracle, and one of the few places where the Catholic Church accepts that a miracle took place.
When an apparition is stated by the Church to be worthy of belief, bishops or a pope go to the shrine. This certainly is a very strong recommendation to the Catholic believer. It's not binding, you can still disagree if you want to, but that clearly the highest authorities in the Church would not single it out in this way if they didn't think that it probably was true.
In the spring of 1917, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta claimed to have seen an angel. an angel that told them that soon they would be visited by the Virgin Mary.
When the children first reported this to their parents, they were horrified because most really solid Catholics, even if they're not all that well educated, they know this does not happen every day, and that usually when somebody claims it, it's not true.
But the children were convinced, and they anxiously awaited the arrival of the beautiful woman who would become known to them as the Virgin Mary. Then on May the 13th, 1917, the angel's prophecy was reportedly fulfilled.
The first appearance was where she had to identify herself to them, and as is often reported in apparitions of the Blessed Virgin, she was radiant, showing that it was a supernatural being.
According to the children, the Virgin Mary appeared numerous times with messages of prophecy. As years passed, many of these predictions apparently came true. The children described what may be the rise of communism, with the genocide of millions and the enslavement of nations. They also described what could have been the fall of communism in Russia. Back in 1917, these dire predictions were greeted with suspicion. It wasn't until the children predicted a miracle that even the most skeptical of minds were made true believers. On October the 13th, 1917, tens of thousands of people anxiously awaited the appointed day and hour.
The children were there, and this huge crowd was pressing in, and the rain was pouring down, and all of a sudden the rain stopped, and the clouds parted, and the sun appeared. And then the crowd saw the sun begin to move and to dance in the sky, as it was described, and to fall down almost to the horizon.
The crowd was in absolute awe. There were many of the free thinkers from Spain and Portugal there who were very much against religion or anything of this nature, who immediately were convinced and fell on their knees and started repenting and asking for forgiveness for their lack of belief. It was an awesome experience, and it did show to the world that something valid had been happening at Fatima.
Despite the so-called miracle of the sun, there were still many questions as to the validity of the children's story. It would take time, but eventually even hardened disbelievers would come to rethink the events of 1917.
This is very important, to follow what happens to the children or to anyone who sees or claims to have seen the Blessed Virgin Mary. One of the best proofs of whether it was really she is whether their lives are fundamentally and forever changed. And it certainly happened with the Fatima children.
Early on in the apparitions, the children were told that two of them would die and would go to heaven, and the other one would remain for many years. Now, this has absolutely happened, and it happened right away. The children died of the terrible influenza epidemic which was going on. And this is hardly a thing that children could have foreseen or would have created for themselves.
In the case of the third child, Lucia, we have overwhelming evidence. She desired nothing but the religious life from the time that this happened. She has been in the cloistered Carmelite house at Coimbra since 1948. This is the life that she wants, that she welcomes, a life of total devotion to God and to the Blessed Virgin.
"45 years later, Lucia still lives in a convent. With her remains the last message, or perhaps a final prophecy from Fatima. Whichever it is, Lucia has only shared it with one other person, Pope John Paul II. Some speculate that their shroud of silence covers some future catastrophe, but it's a secret that apparently will never be known. But perhaps the essence of that secret can be found elsewhere. Garabandal, Spain, another sleepy little town, another place to play host to reported supernatural events. The year was 1961, and the phenomena that happened here were eventually well recorded. But in the beginning, there was nothing but the words of worried children. 4 little girls, Conchita, Mary Louise, Jacinta, and Mary Cruz, were enjoying a day like any other. They had been stealing apples when a loud noise marked the beginning of a string of events that would reportedly last several years.
It was pretty foggy. It looked like the fog became very bright, like a very white light. And I remember to hear a noise like a thunder. It was a big bump.
They became very frightened. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. And the oldest girl, Conchita, suddenly falls on her knees. Her head goes back, She's looking up toward the sky. Her complexion changes, and the other three girls, believing that she has become ill, get ready to run to call her mother. But they don't get very far because the exact same thing happens to them. And when they are normal again, they head in the direction of the village, and the people, seeing them approach, say, "What is it? What's happened? Why do you have such white faces, such strange looks?" And all together, in one voice, they say, "The angel, the angel, we have seen the angel."
In Garabandal, as in Fatima, the children were accused of having overactive imaginations. But many were still curious, and when the news spread, people swarmed to the village to await some sign, a sign that would give credibility to the angel's prediction that the Virgin Mary would soon appear to the girls. It didn't take long. Soon, everyone found themselves witness to the four girls falling into a state of mind that was known as ecstasy. And this is some of the actual footage that was recorded at the time.
When the girls fell in ecstasy, it was always with a crash. Sometimes you could actually see their hair bouncing. The force of the crash was so tremendous. And if they happened to crash on rocks, the people would be in awe, frightened that their bones were broken, but they were never hurt. When they got through with the ecstasy, they just stand up, brush the dirt off their knees.
People were shocked and mystified. Garabandal became famous. The crowds grew as the amazing phenomena continued. Many of these were captured on film. This is Mary Loli supposedly levitating. More remarkable than levitation are the reports that while one young child was in this state of ecstasy, 4 men could not move her. Eyewitnesses were convinced that something of great spiritual significance was happening to the children.
There were many phenomena that took place that remain unexplained to this very day. The girls running backwards. This was common occurrence, regardless of the day or the hour. They actually ran as though they had wings on their feet.
Then the medical community arrived, searching for a more scientific explanation.
There was a time when doctors would burn a matchstick in front of their eyes to see if they would flicker their eyes and blink and wink. No reaction. They stuck pins in them. They flashed bright lights in their eyes. Nothing bothered them. Nothing hurt them. And nothing left scars. Never.
Here is Conchita, apparently in a state of ecstasy. Watch her eyes as the source of bright light is being beamed directly at them.
Numerous spotlights are falling on Conchita's eyes, while the child, with a celestial expression, keeps on repeating the words the angel is communicating.
Over a period of 4 years, the girls experienced thousands of ecstasies, and during that time they predicted many things for many people. However, there were 2 nights when the girls predicted future events that would affect everyone. That night became known as the Night of Screams.
The people began to follow them as usual. They said, "No, don't follow us. You can't come." And when the girls got to the spot, they knew Our Lady was waiting for them, and they fell into ecstasy. They began screaming in the most terrifying way. What they saw has not been described clearly, except at a certain time, not a single motor is going to operate throughout the world. A terrible heat will come. And during this time of heat, people will look for water and they will not be able to find it. And they're going to attempt to kill one another in their desperation. The chastisement is more terrible than we can possibly imagine because it will come directly from the hand of God. The chastisement is conditional, and it depends on whether or not we comply with the message. If we change our ways in life and we really make an effort to repent and make our lives better, then we can hold back the chastisement.
It's been more than 20 years since the girls experienced ecstasy. Now that they are grown, they too question the whole experience.
It really seems to me like happened to somebody else, so I don't know. I just try to remember the little girl going back and forth, but I don't remember to think anything.
The four now live in different parts of the world. Their time in Garabandal has long since passed, but the events there are well remembered. According to believers, the end they predicted may be near. During the night of screams, a date was set, and this information was given to the girls. But they're not talking. Maybe they're unsure of what happened so long ago, but they have a date in their minds and are forbidden to release that information until exactly 8 days before the final moment.
The events at Garabandal and Fatima are both decidedly religious in nature. Both demonstrate ways in which prophecy can be received, and both warn of a dramatic upheaval looming in the future. But now we come to an even more famous visionary, a 20th century American some called the Sleeping Prophet. Those who claim to be prophets often appear to have much in common. Childhood visions of beautiful women, the power to heal or project into the future. One man who claimed to hold these gifts was an American named Edgar Casey.
Casey may have been history's most accurate and most documented psychic, but in everyday life he was a humble man whose powers were often as much a burden as a gift.
What to call Edgar Casey has always been a problem. I don't think that Edgar Casey himself would have chosen the title of prophet that carries so much sense of importance, and Edgar Casey was not a man to be self-important.
Dad considered his ability as a gift from God to help people, and that's what he wanted to do.
Born in rural Kentucky in 1877, Edgar Casey began showing remarkable qualities even as a boy.
When Edgar Casey was young, he had kind of an unusual ability. He told his mother that he communicated with his dead grandfather, and to him this was not unusual at all.
Edgar Casey did have a boyhood vision. He was off playing in the woods in a place that was his own private place to get away and think about things. And he heard a voice.
Edgar, Edgar.
Edgar looked up into the sky and saw a vision of a beautiful woman.
Edgar, what is it you'd most like to do with your life?
I don't know. Help people? I want to help people.
That decision on Edgar Casey's part as a young boy really set a tone for his life. It was shortly after that he was having a very difficult time with his spelling lessons.
He wasn't a very good student, and my grandfather, his father, was calling out his spelling words one time, and he couldn't spell them very well.
A-B-L-I-N?
Wrong. Try again.
Cabin. C-A-B-B-A-N.
Wrong. Read it again. One way or another, you're going to get through this tonight.
He heard a voice, and it was the voice of this same woman who had appeared to him in the woods.
Edgar, sleep, and we shall help you.
And he lay down with his head on his spelling book.
Wake up. Let's try one more time. Spell cabin.
C-A-B-I-N. The word after that is D-R-A-G-O-N-F-L-Y, dragonfly, and pseudonym, P-S-E-U-D-O-N-Y-M. That word's on page 48. It's like I can see every page of the book now.
Years passed. Young Edgar Casey married his childhood sweetheart, Gertrude Evans, and settled down to raise a family. But in 1901, his mysterious gift would come back to haunt him.
He lost his voice for a year and a half, and he'd been examined by doctors, specialists.
At that time, hypnosis was a kind of new fad, and someone suggested, well, why don't you try hypnosis? You've tried everything else.
Put in a deep hypnotic trance, Casey restored his voice in what witnesses report to be an astonishing cure. In the years to come, he would again call upon this strange healing power to apparently restore his young son's eyesight and save his wife from near-fatal tuberculosis.
That was the confirmation he needed in order to go about the work of helping other people. My wife got well, my son got well. How can I possibly turn anybody else away who comes to see me?
As word spread of his power, a number of doctors began secretly writing to him for help with their most baffling cases. As a child, Edgar Casey had said that he wanted to help people. At last, he had found his calling.
When Edgar Casey would give a reading, he would go into a small study with his wife, Gertrude, and his secretary, Gladys Davis, and he would literally go into a sleep state. When his eyelids began to flutter, then his wife, Gertrude, would read this suggestion for the person receiving a reading.
You have before you the body of Laura Blythe, who was in Chicago at 2450 Lincoln Avenue. You will go over this body carefully and tell me the conditions you find.
Then there would be a pause. And it was as if during this time, Casey was literally going to the person's address to where they lived, even though it may have been hundreds of miles away.
We are on State Street, past Wacker. Now we are on Lincoln Avenue, 2-story house. The kitchen, something is burning. We are in an attic. Nice red pajamas. Now we have the body.
He would go through every major system of the body and identify where the problems lie.
We are inside, through the nerves, into the arteries, the heart, the lungs, the liver. We have infection in a leg.
Laura has a bad sore on her leg that is terribly festered. She has a fever, is now bedridden. The doctors want to amputate.
Yes, they are in pain. Thy lesion is from the bite of a tiny brown spider 4 months ago while sleeping.
What is the treatment for cure and relief of this body?
Apply oil of smoke for 2 weeks. Will save our leg. Bancroft Pharmacy, Chicago. Back shelf. Top right side. Oil of smoke.
No oil of smoke. I'm afraid you're out of luck. That was an old patent medicine. Company went bust about 1915. Yeah.
So they did a so-called check reading where they would ask again about a situation. And the response, in essence, was, yes, they do too have it. It's behind the blue bottle. And the response came, found it where you said it was. It's on the way.
Not everyone was pleased with Casey's methods. Several doctors inside the medical establishment set out to prove him a fraud.
One of them said that they would prove that Edgar Casey was not in a trance, so they took a needle and they poked it through his cheek and took a scalpel and literally tore off his small fingernail. No response, again, from Casey. Casey woke up in absolute agony and vowed that he would never again try to prove anything to any professionals again. That was his first and last public demonstration of his psychic ability.
Written off as lost causes by medical science, many patients turned to Casey as their last hope.
There was a health reading that Casey gave for a woman who was told that she was clinically insane. She was in an institution. In the reading, Casey said an impacted wisdom tooth was impinging the nerves that were governing the brain's activity. They literally sent a dentist into the institution, pulled the tooth. Of course, the attending physician said it's not going to make a bit of difference. Within several days, she walked out and she was perfectly fine. After he had diagnosed the patient, he said, "We are through for the present." That meant for his wife, who was conducting the reading, to give him the suggestion to wake up.
We no longer have the body. We are through for the present.
Now, perfectly relaxed. Your body healthy. Wake up.
Casey never remembered what had been said during a reading.
Did we get it?
Maybe, but something's very queer. After inflammation of the spleen, pancreatitis, the reading just broke off midway.
The reading had been mysteriously cut short. Days later, they would find out why. In a distant city, Casey's gravely ill patient had died midway through the reading. While in a deep trance, Casey seemed to travel through time and space and tap into the power to heal. But awake, he was often a prisoner of his power.
Edgar Casey was very psychic in the conscious state, and I think it was more of a burden than anything else.
He wouldn't play cards. I mean, he would play games, but he tried not to play. He said it was too easy for him to read the hands.
First up will be the 3 of clubs, then the ace of spades, the 4 of hearts, the queen of diamonds.
You couldn't get away with anything. You couldn't lie to him. He knew what you'd done, and pretty soon I didn't try.
Not only was Casey known as a mind reader, it was reported he could also see a person's life force, an aura of light surrounding the living.
Do you have any idea what that wretched Fitzgerald woman across the street just said to me?
I see a red aura all around you. Please come back when you're not quite so angry.
His ability to see auras at one time saved his life. He was in a department store in New York City. He was about to step into an elevator. He always saw these color patterns surrounding the bodies of people around him. It was a natural thing for him.
As Casey recounted this story, he was a man hovering between the world of the living and the dead.
Well, when these elevator doors parted, he noticed that there were not the particular color patterns surrounding these people.
Going down.
He instantly knew he wasn't going to get on the elevator. The cable on the elevator snapped, and all of the people that were in the elevator were subsequently killed.
From his deep trance state, Casey began reporting snapshots of the future. They were a byproduct, side remarks made unconsciously during his medical readings, but they were prophecy nonetheless. Edgar Casey had become the sleeping prophet.
There will be a panic in the money centers. Not only Wall Street, but a closing of the boards in many other centers.
Prophecy of the 1929 stock market crash slipped out during a routine reading months before the market collapsed. Casey made hundreds more prophecies, all documented and filed away. It was believed he predicted the dates that the Second World War would start and finish, as well as the social and racial upheavals that would rip the United States in mid-century. He also foresaw the discovery of laser light and blood tests in medicine, the unearthing of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the fall of communism in Russia.
In Russia comes the hope of the world, not as that sometimes termed of the communistic. No, but freedom.
But where did Casey's information come from? Author Lynn Sparrow has a theory.
He was able to tap the so-called universal mind. He was able to tap that level of awareness where all of us are linked together. All that has ever happened on this planet has left an impression. And Edgar Casey was able to tune into that like a good radio receiver picks up a radio wave.
The earth will be broken up in the western portion of America. The greater portion of Japan must go into the sea.
Many of the premonitions Casey supposedly received involved cataclysmic Earth changes at the end of this century, including polar shifts that would reverse the Earth's magnetic field.
There will be a shifting of the poles, so that what has been a frigid land will become the more tropical.
There were readings that pointed to change that would be big enough so that the Great Lakes emptied directly into the Gulf of Mexico, changes in the general sea coastlines.
What is the coastline now of many a land will be the bed of the ocean.
Casey gave some predictions that are pretty grim, that are somewhat frightening. He did talk about the destruction of New York and the western portion of America.
Los Angeles, San Francisco, all of these will be among those that will be destroyed before New York even.
January the 3rd, 1945, Edgar Casey died, but his prophecies live on.
They used to bring the mail in trucks, and the telephone would ring until he had to get an unlisted number. He would get telegrams, and people would just begging him for readings. They would say, "My wife's dying, my daughter's dying, nobody can help her. You've got to help me. What can you do, please?" You know, it was just a tremendous pressure. I guess people are going to remember him different ways. I remember him, as, of course, as a father and a really remarkable person, and I think he really tried to help people during his lifetime, and I think he succeeded.
Edgar Casey's 14,000 readings, archived at the Association of Research and Enlightenment Library in Virginia Beach, Virginia, are still the subject of study by scholars and scientists. Casey's gift demonstrated that seeing into the future was not a skill to be learned. Prophets aren't taught. They're seemingly chosen. The gift of prophecy appears in all cultures, from ancient Egyptians to Native Americans. And sometimes this prophecy is transmitted purportedly through another person, an emissary, if you like. One such person was a Native American woman by the name of Mary Summer Rain, who claims to have received prophecies from an Indian seer by the name of No Eyes. Through a mystical vision, Mary believes she was chosen, not as a prophet, but rather as a messenger of prophetic warnings. And she was given a name, Summer Rain, by her mentor and guide, an 80-year-old Chippewa woman. This was the woman known as No Eyes.
No Eyes learned to see into the future and to forecast what was going to happen. No Eyes was the greatest visionary of our time.
As a young woman, Mary was living with her husband in suburban Michigan when she had a prophetic dream that signaled her future.
I had a dream that No Eyes appeared at the end of my bed, and she had a message for me.
You not who you think you are. You Summer Rain. Soon you move west.
When I woke up, I didn't know if it was really a dream or if she had really said that. I talked it over with my husband, Bill. We had no idea what Summer Rain meant, but we did have plans to move west. In 1977, we did move to Colorado.
While in Colorado, Mary pursued her lifelong ambition of becoming a novelist. But after hundreds of letters of rejection, she began to give up hope.
When I got my last rejection back, I was very depressed. So I took our pickup and started driving out into the woods. I didn't know where I was going. And when I found a spot that I really liked, I stopped and got out. I walked over to a log and I cried my eyes out. Suddenly I had the chills go up my back, and I looked up and there was an old woman standing in the pines.
Summer Rain, you come.
My God, it's you.
You can imagine how spooky that was for me. She led me up to her cabin, and from then on she became my mentor and friend for 2 years.
Some are gonna hear about signs and sounds.
She taught me all the old ways. She taught me true spirituality. Eventually, it got into more complicated lessons of how to do visions, how to see into the future. Noise had many ways of receiving visions. She would toss 7 natural ingredients one by one into a fire. When she was done, images would appear in the rising smoke.
No Eyes saw the future in the form of a great phoenix, a bird that would rise from Mother Earth amidst terrible devastation.
When great phoenix come out of Earth Mother, her skin gonna tear bad.
You mean earthquakes?
Great storms come. They cover all towns. Summer and winter all mix up.
Floods, earthquakes, Mother Earth rising in revolt. But the great phoenix also warned No Eyes of upheaval caused by man.
He gonna hear bodies hit the ground and hear people's moan in great sickness.
Why?
Countries gonna be angry with each other. New countries gonna make nuclear bombs too.
No Eyes, what is the phoenix doing now?
He cry in great wail for people's future.
Mary Summer Rain believes that when No Eyes died, she left her with a very important mission.
No Eyes made me promise to write of our times together so that her wisdom and her message would not end with her.
Mary Summer Rain, through the teachings of No Eyes, foretells of a series of cataclysmic natural disasters to befall the earth. Others share the same visions. Among them a man from the northeast corner of America by the name of Gordon Michael Scallion. Scallion claims that he sees a time when all life may perish.
In 98 to 2001, the Earth becomes very quiet. The animals are quiet. Then a wind picked up from the east. It was hurricane velocity. I then watched the sun reverse its direction in the sky. The oceans themselves buckled and land masses were thrust up. Can't even begin to tell you how many sleepless nights I've had and the nights where I've just emotionally just totally lost it.
Scallion claims to live with a nightmare. Visions of cataclysmic earth changes that could wreak disaster by the year 2000. Gordon Michael Scallion didn't ask to become a prophet. In 1979, the gift of prophecy apparently chose him.
Prior to 1979, I had absolutely no belief system in the field of the paranormal. My background was more scientific, more electronic. I was a communications consultant, and I lost my voice one day.
Field operations to corporate headquarters and management oversight. Thirdly, wideband ground.
Are you all right?
It looks like he's choking.
It was like someone went in and removed my larynx. And the people I was with that day thought I was having a stroke. That placed me into the hospital for observation to see what was wrong. And that night, while in the hospital, a vision appeared and terrified me. The vision was a vision of a woman who seemed to float into the room and gave me some instructions, told me to write down what she was going to tell me. And I did. And what she told me was the beginning of prophecy as I've come to know them.
The next morning, Scallion says his voice mysteriously returned.
Good morning, Mr. Scallion. How are we feeling?
Better, thanks.
This says you can't speak.
I guess I'm okay. Wait a minute. There's something wrong with my eyes. It's like a weird glow or something.
Scallion was unaware he had just seen what he now believes to be his first aura.
I said, there's still something wrong with me. You better check my eyes now.
Okay, Mr. Scallion, put your chin right in there.
And they gave me an eye exam there, and they said there's nothing wrong with your vision. And I began to do some conventional therapies, psychologists, psychiatrists, MDs, and that continued. And as I worked more with these people, more would occur. And I decided that if I stopped working with these people, it would all go away. And it did for about a month. One of the things that happened immediately thereafter is my vision became very distorted. When I looked at things, I no longer saw things in the normal color patterns, but I saw images around people and animals and trees.
Word spread of Scallion's strange powers. Not only could he supposedly read auras, but allegedly he could look inside the body and detect disease. Soon the sick and desperate began showing up at his door.
Gordon Michael Scallion?
Yes?
I'm sorry to disturb you like this, but this is Chris, and I'm his mom.
I'm sorry.
Please, the doctors don't know what's wrong with him, and I've heard that you're able to see inside.
Stop. I can't do it. You don't understand. I'm not a doctor. I can't help. Muscle's okay. Weakness is not from disease. That's why they don't know what it is. He's been poisoned. Heavy metals, 2 years ago.
His world of science and logic had vanished, thrusting Gordon Michael Scallion into a foreign land, a land of auras and visions. Visions which took him into deep trances. In these unconscious states, Scallion began talking, sometimes babbling about geological disasters. When he awoke, he remembered nothing, but he was always filled with a sense of impending doom. When his wife, Cynthia Keyes, first witnessed her husband's deep trances, she didn't know what was happening. But by recording his unconscious states, it was soon discovered he was predicting future geological events.
When he did go into a deep trance, his body would manifest changes. His body would go into almost a slump, and then he would sit straight up and begin to speak.
Richter 7.4, early February 1998, Southern California. A fault running east to west near Riverside. A forerunner of 8.1 Richter on San Andreas. Upward plate thrust.
I used to have to literally go and take a nap after I have one of these visions of 3 to 4 hours. And then there were times where I was in bed for 2 or 3 days. And that was a common thing throughout the 80s. Now, what seems to happen is that when I'm at my word processor, I receive these visions.
Scallion claims his visions are all of cataclysmic disasters. Simultaneous tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, and volcanic eruptions, all exploding across our planet in the years leading up to the millennium.
The disasters that I see occur in a sequence, and I'm given the warning signs of what the sequence would be. The kind of details that I see are the actual collapsing of the buildings, the people running in panic, the actual people, watching the water actually come in and covering communities. I see cargo planes coming in with Red Cross symbols on the side.
If even a percentage of his visions came to pass, Scallion decided he could still help save lives. In 1991, he began publishing his prophecies of future disasters in the Earth Changes Report.
The newsletter is a way of communicating with the public some of the prophecies that Gordon sees for the future in the United States and the rest of the world.
When Hurricane Andrew occurred, a year ahead of time, I warned about it. And then even a month before, I knew the direction it would come, the wind velocity, where it would land, and I warned as many people as I could. Since '91, when I began publishing the Earth Changes Report, the predictions that were significant were that first that LA would have earthquakes on April of '92, followed by the June 28th Landers earthquake, the floods in the Midwest and the Mississippi, the eruptions of Mount Pinatubo.
Scallion and his wife transformed their home into the Matrix Institute, a 24-hour hotline access to Scallion's prophecies occurring or predicted to occur within any given month.
I created a map of the future United States. This was a map that was a consolidation of the visions that I was receiving, and it represented what the United States would look like between 1998 and 2001. So the new West Coast will be in the area of Nebraska, down through Boulder and Denver, through this area is the new West Coast. And California has become a series of islands. Here, the Mississippi has expanded, the Great Lakes have merged. Good portions of New Jersey go underwater. Some of the changes occur abruptly, some of the changes give us warning signs. The worst places is wherever you are when something like this explodes.
What he once considered a burden, Scallion now calls a gift in disguise. Gordon Michael Scallion believes his prophecies will help mankind prepare for the future.
I believe prophecy is given predominantly for two reasons. One is it's given to help us prepare for what is going to happen, or it helps us to change what the outcome would be. And so the loss of life could be significant unless we heed the warnings.
Warning signs abound. A chorus of prophetic voices have predicted worldwide upheaval in the near future. But a few have taken action to ensure their survival. Paradise Valley, Montana, Big Sky country, land of cattle ranches in Yellowstone National Park, and home to 3,000 people prepared for global apocalypse. For the members of Church Universal and Triumphant, Royal Teton Ranch, Montana, is a physical and spiritual home. There they practice their New Age Christian faith and find refuge from the outside world. The church is led by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, teacher, author, and to her followers, divine messenger. Her gift of prophecy foretells a dark future.
It's a period of intensification in all of our lives. We see this in disturbances in the elements, the upheavals of tornado, of flood, tremendous storms, the Mississippi, the Missouri, sudden deaths. We see it in the last plagues. We see it in cancer and AIDS, in all kinds of incurable diseases. These are coming upon us.
Determined to survive, church members have followed Mrs. Prophet's injunction to construct dozens of bomb shelters beneath the rolling countryside.
Their main shelter complex is the largest and most complete fallout shelter in this country. They have everything in there that they feel they need to reestablish themselves on the earth after a major apocalypse has destroyed everything.
The bunkers range from family size to a massive structure designed to house 600 staff members. Each is stocked with a 7-year supply of food. They are equipped with everything from water wells and septic systems to shortwave radios and children's games.
You must be prepared for whatever kind of cataclysm or whatever kind of difficulty can arise in which all of a sudden you may find that you don't have access to a store, so you can't get food. You don't have access to water. And we all need water and food to live on.
If there's ever a disruption of the civil order, in other words, the trucking breaks down, shipping breaks down, a lot of people are just simply not going to have food.
In recent years, Mrs. Prophet claims to have foretold the rise and fall of George Bush and the 1987 stock market crash.
I awakened at 3 and 4 in the morning the day that the stock market fell and ultimately fell 500 points. I saw all that ahead of time.
Let there be a place where children are yet carefree, and let that place be called the Royal Teton Ranch.
I feel very strongly that Elizabeth Clare Prophet is an authentic spiritual leader. The people I've met in Church Universal and Triumphant were either very high-quality people to begin with, or else they have been in some manner transformed by following those teachings and following that path.
The church is a highly diverse community with a shared belief in self-reliance. It produces and processes much of its own food. It runs its own school system. And the favored entertainment comes from a musical group comprised entirely of church members, the Paradise Players. The community also believes in self-preservation, and that means preparing for the worst.
We take a lot of care to make sure that we have hospitalization insurance, fire insurance, accident, theft, and all these other things. And yet, when we look at the planet as a whole, if you really look around, you'll see that there's war all over the place.
People have been schooled to think that if someone ever pushes the button, it's all over. I think that if there is a nuclear war, or if there's a rogue launch or something like that, obviously people are going to get killed. The problem that I see is that many more people will lose their lives than is necessary. And that, to me, that's a great tragedy.
Moses told us, choose life, not death. I cannot choose to allow myself to die when I know how to protect myself and my family from dying. So to me, shelters are the way to do that. But shelters are also in the eventuality of earth changes. Major changes may be coming upon this planet. And it might be that someday the only place to be safe just from earth changes is underground. We shouldn't plan on dying. We should accept life and know that we have to pass on our culture to posterity. So I have members on every continent, and they have centers, they have shelters. I have placed the repository of the entire body of our teachings on each of these continents and in many nations on microfiche. 500 years from now or 1,000 years from now, when technology is back on its legs, we will find that these groups of people all over the world have evolved and developed and maintained what we had of a civilization by the end of the 20th century.
Elizabeth Clare Prophet and her relatively small group of followers have planned for a destiny that they believe is inevitable. But centuries ago, a book was written that is said to foretell of a similar fate. There is an ancient document which warns us that perilous times shall come. The Bible also speaks of healing, miracles, and resurrection. But Revelation, the final chapter of the New Testament, suggests that the biblical predictions of the apocalypse, the return of the Antichrist, and the battle of Armageddon may all come to pass. There followed fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. Trees were burnt up, and all green grass was burnt. And as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. A haunting prophecy passed down for nearly 2,000 years. This ancient document is a fascinating source of prophecy, which may point directly to our time, and is believed to predict a terrifying future called the apocalypse, or in other words, the end of time. Dr. Charles Strozier believes the signs are all around us. He is the author of Apocalypse on the Psychology of Fundamentalism in America.
Revelation is a highly symbolic book. So I would call it a myth of transformation that moves through violence. Violence is the regenerative mode. People have to be changed, cleansed. Human history has to be cleansed and ended in order for this new creation, this new recreation.
But before the new earth can be created, Revelation suggests the end of human history as we know it, the so-called end time. According to some, the Bible predicts a time of torture and tribulation, the conclusion of God's time and the reign of the Antichrist.
Antichrist and the image of Antichrist is a very important part of the end time process, and first reveals himself as a messenger of peace. And it's a false peace that lulls the nations to sleep. And the message, the psychological message, is beware the peacemaker. It locates in the minds of a quarter of the population a deep fear of anything that moves toward peace. That matters in a democracy.
The Bible is said to predict that the Antichrist will rule for a period of 7 years and that 10 nations will unite under his leadership. Many Bible scholars interpret this as the nations of the European Common Market.
The key idea, though, is that Antichrist has been born, which is crucial to that unfolding of the end time process. Because after all, if he's born, that means we only have a generation for history to last.
According to some interpretations, Revelation tells us the Antichrist will force his followers to wear the so-called mark of the beast, associated with the number 666. Some Bible scholars believe these marks will separate the faithful from the damned. The Reverend Dr. R.L. Heimers interprets it this way.
There's no question that the Bible speaks about a rise in satanic worship at the end of time. There will be thousands of people that become Christians because they realize that this prophecy has been fulfilled and that we are under the Antichrist. During his last 3.5 years, the Antichrist becomes a horrible dictator, Hitler tried to do that. He'll do what Hitler tried to do.
As a further indication that the end may be near, the Bible warns us of deadly storms and floods. There shall be signs in the moon, the sun, in the stars, on an earth distress of nations. Reverend Hall interprets.
There will be an earthquake hit the central part of the United States and destroy perhaps more properties and people than any earthquake that we've ever had.
Before the end of the earth as we know it, some Christians believe that those who reject the Antichrist can be saved through the miracle of the rapture, by literally joining Jesus in the clouds of heaven.
I feel that the rapture of the church could well come in my lifetime. We've seen things moving very rapidly. Those that believe the Bible and think about these things, we see things in the newspaper every day that seem to point that the time is short.
Followers of the Bible prophecy believe the very short time that is left will end with the battle called Armageddon, an actual city east of Israel called Megiddo that will be completely destroyed. They say the Bible predicts it will take 7 months to bury the dead after the apocalyptic, possibly nuclear battle of Armageddon in the heart of the Mideast.
It takes an act of imagination not to imagine at some time, at some point in one's life, those endings or that ending. When I say that ending, I mean the end to human existence. And that's what's so extraordinary. And that's what I think is new. It makes a difference that it is a real scientific possibility. The prophecies say it's all about to end. It seems without hope. And the only thing we can have is faith and commitment to grab some meaning for our lives now, even though we know in the end it'll all be destroyed.
The Bible's prophecies have long been used by scholars and religious leaders as warning signs for mankind. But beyond the predictions of the printed word, what actual occurrences point to such calamities? The answers can be found all around us. We are rapidly approaching the end of the millennium, and many prophets and prophecies point to the year 2000 as the termination of life on earth. Why have they chosen this moment in time? Are there current signs that might warn that the apocalypse may soon be upon us?
It is a unique period in the history of the world. We have reached a time where population growth and the depletion of the planet's natural resources are producing profound environmental changes with catastrophic consequences. Devastating floods, earthquakes, droughts, tidal waves, hurricanes and tornadoes now occur with greater frequency and more devastating impact. How can these increasingly erratic weather extremes be explained? Kelly Quirk is a climate change specialist with Greenpeace.
Primarily because of fossil fuel combustion, we are loading tons and tons and tons of what are known as greenhouse gases, those gases that trap the sun's heat in the Earth's atmosphere, into the atmosphere, which is warming the planet. But what that is causing is a change in weather, is a destabilization of climate. And so what you have is the environmental impacts, which are increasing windstorms, threats to agriculture, increasing famine and drought, sea level rise, the receding glaciers, the melting of Arctic ice. The potential dangers and the catastrophes are so terrifying to people that I think they want to believe it can't be happening.
Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce, and Gordon Michael Scallion all have been interpreted as foreseeing extreme weather as a part of the end of the world. But environmental changes not only affect the weather, they greatly impact health. The effect of the depletion of the ozone layer can be chillingly witnessed in Australia. Harry Darlington is with the Ozone Society.
In Australia alone, there are 140,000 new skin cancers, cases of skin cancer every year. They instituted a law 2 years ago where children have to wear protective clothing when they go to school. It's very, very serious.
And virologist Dr. Stephen Morse believes the emergence of new diseases caused by previously unknown viruses may be rooted in the destruction of rainforests.
As people cut down the forests and plant things, there are many opportunities for viruses that were formerly buried in the underbrush. This is happening on an unprecedented scale all over the world as we see deforestation and environmental change happening.
Nostradamus has been interpreted as warning of a horrifying pestilence accompanying the apocalypse. When viruses are studied in laboratories, they are classified in 4 levels, 4 being a virus that travels through the air. These airborne viruses are the easiest to transmit and the most deadly. While the impact of AIDS on the global population cannot be understated, the AIDS virus is classified as a level 2 virus because its transmission is believed to be through body fluids and therefore considered much more difficult to catch. Medical scientists are growing increasingly alarmed at the proliferation of level 4 viruses. The most deadly of such viruses is the Ebola.
Ebola is a virus that appeared suddenly in 2 outbreaks in Africa. The disease was sudden and dramatic. It causes a fever with rash, bleeding, often internally, shock. We call it a hemorrhagic fever. Hemorrhagic referring to the leakiness of blood vessels. And people eventually, in many cases, will die of shock just because their blood vessels leak and they bleed internally. To catch it means an 80% chance of dying.
All levels and types of viruses are being continually studied at the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases in Maryland. The laboratory is now analyzing the Hunter virus, which sprang up seemingly out of nowhere. This virus continues to claim people's lives. Dr. Peter Yarling is a scientific advisor at the facility.
The virus is transmitted to man via the aerosol route. The virus reservoir is a field mouse, and that is through inhalation of droplets and excrete a contaminated material that humans become involved.
So the conditions for epidemics are increasing worldwide and will continue to increase for the foreseeable future.
Almost all of the prophets, ancient and modern, seem to foretell of the apocalypse as a fire in the sky, an all-out war, Today, while the United States and former Soviet Union are at peace, the threat of a nuclear war remains potent. Iran, Iraq, India, Pakistan and North Korea are rumored to possess the bomb. And the chance of a nuclear weapon falling into the hands of an irresponsible government bent on destruction is a frighteningly real possibility, according to nuclear physicist Dr. Ted Taylor.
The hard part of making nuclear weapons is producing the plutonium, which is what starts the explosion, whether it's A bomb or an H bomb. There are now more than 30 countries in the world in which automatically, as a result of producing nuclear power, they have plutonium.
But governments aren't the only ones to covet nuclear weapons. A great fear is that these bombs are falling into the hands of terrorists. The parts needed to make these explosives are cheap and available. Some may even be obtainable through the Russian black market. How to assemble the bomb is information that has been published and can be obtained easily. The weapon can be small enough to fit into a suitcase, making concealment no problem. Edgar Cayce and Nostradamus are interpreted as predicting the destruction of New York City. If the World Trade Center had been bombed with a nuclear device, the results would have been catastrophic.
Humanity is at its most critical stage ever. We have a lot of decisions that will determine in what directions things proceed that carry with them the prospects for the worst of the prophecies, in some sense, coming true.
The Egyptians described the end of time as a bottomless pit at the base of the Great Pyramid. St. Malachi and Nostradamus envisioned cataclysmic devastation. Fatima and Garibaldо were warned about a final punishment. Edgar Cayce, No Eyes, and Gordon Michael Scallion were flooded with visions of global natural disasters. And Elizabeth Clare Prophet and her group prepare for a nuclear holocaust the Bible describes as Armageddon. Do all the stories we've heard point to a natural end? No one knows for certain. But in the 19th century, Charles Dickens wrote, "Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, but if these courses be departed from, the ends will change." In such wisdom lies the real truth of prophecy. But whatever our futures, the power to change it rests firmly in our own hands.